May 2025 solo world record, world championships qualification, an opportunity to double up in Chicago, and a shot at both and being crowned a double world champion. Hello and welcome to On the Rocks podcast with me, Coach Marshy. Hope everyone is well and congratulations at the time of recording to your end of season in the Hyrox space. We are now post World Championships, post Chicago 2025. What a blast it was. What an absolute event, a spectacle and a growth within the sport. And on that note, we're going to welcome in today's guest. Welcome to Avril. Hello, Avril. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. And thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. I'm going to dive straight in really quickly into something. What I really want to know, burning question for me is from the beginning, what throughout your life and which sports have you been involved in and what made you kind of active originally? And then we'll get into the rest in a bit.
Yeah, I suppose it started at school. I was in the my senior school. I was in the athletics team, did the 100, 200, 400 and the relay. Enjoyed that. I was rubbish at javelin and things like that. So certainly realised where my affinity lay in the athletics team. And I was also captain of the hockey team. Really enjoyed that. Leaving that at college, had to go trampolining. Actually hurt my back doing that. So I did a crash dive and really hurt my back. And that affected my dancing because I'd danced since I was 7 years of age. And all I ever wanted to be was be a professional dancer. And it sounds rather arrogant, really, but I felt I had the potential to be a dancer. Parents insisted I do a secretarial course, so I've got something as a backup. And that's really where my focus was. I ended up being really semi-pro because I met my ex-husband doing a show, a TV show. He was in a group at the time, and you do the usual thing, you fall in love, and that put stop to that. But I carried on doing cabaret work and things. But certainly doing cabaret work, 2 45-minute spots, you need quite a lot of stamina. It was a vocal dance group as well, so when you're singing and all the rest of it, and a lot of costume changes, you need to be fit. So I started going to the gym, using weights and so forth. And then really, once I was married and I'd had, well, even really, whilst I was expecting my son, I was still running. I was still even doing acrobatics and things like that, still walking on my hands and standing on my head and all of that lot, because I still wanted to remain fit, because I thought I wanted to be healthy during my pregnancy and certainly afterwards. And I wanted to keep my figure, and I wanted to stay strong. And I continued with that. And then whilst my children were growing up, I went to the gym again, doing a lot of circuit training, really, and stuff within the gym. I wasn't coached by anybody. Most of it was self-taught with research, reading books. And I got a big buzz from it because it also helped me from a stress perspective. And I had suffered with depression, and it was really good for me in that respect to have that outlet. I could actually deal with what I was ever dealing with at the time by going to the gym. It was my outlet, if you like, and I have described it before as my saviour, because it certainly has been in my life. And then Gladiators came out, didn't it, the first time round, and they were auditioning for it. I applied, never heard anything. Then I got a notification that I could attend this audition. I'd got 3 weeks to prepare, and at that time I was working in the NHS. And a nurse that I knew, her son owned a gym, and I turned up at this gym because she said, he'll help get you ready. And I walked in, I was the only female. They were all bodybuilders, they were massive. And I walked through the door, this little tiny figure, And they look at me as if to say, what the hell are you doing here? But then they could see I was serious. I was serious. I'd never done a chin up in my life. That's one thing I hadn't done up. And the guy was trying to get me prepared. And I went along and I lost it on the chin ups, as it happens. They were chin ups with 10-second interval lifts. And it was a bit much. I was one of the fastest runners on the day, which was good. But I can remember coming home and my son being brokenhearted because mummy hadn't made it to the gladiators. But I carried on doing my sport. By then, I also trained to do a marathon. I wanted to do a marathon. It was a goal. And again, that was an outlet from my depression to deal with some issues that had been going on. And again, that was reading a book, how to eat, how to train. And I did that in what was a good time. At that time, it was the Coventry Marathon that I did. So really, in all fairness, Neil, then particularly running has remained part of my life. So when I was wound up, if I'd come home from work, had a bad day, get my trainers on, off for a run. When I was doing all of my studies, I could run along and do all my revision in my head. And then going to the gym, seeing your transformation in your body. I wasn't out to be a bodybuilder. For me, it was just staying toned, staying fit, staying healthy. And so it has, in all fairness, been a big part of my life. And even though with my children, I thought it was an opportunity to also show them that you need to still keep your body fit and healthy. And from a young age, I think that's really, really important. I was very fortunate that I fell in love with PE at school. And I think that's where it needs to start, in the schools, but also now with parents, really, to show their kids that, mum and dad, and even nanny or granny or granddad, keeping themselves fit. And I think that inspires them to want to keep fit. So if you like, when it came to Hyrox, I only heard about Hyrox via the gym that I was going to. And I've been very fortunate because my son-in-law and my daughter run a gym, but it's not like it's a community gym. It's not like you walk in and just use the weights. It's all body camps, group session training, personal training, and Hyrox training. And they, a couple of the guys there, Gaz and Dave, had actually made podium a number of times, told us about this. And, God, I thought, this is another challenge. Let's give this a go. And I dived straight in. I did a doubles with my son. That was horrendous because I did make an arse of myself, because I did end up on my arse trying to pull a sled. In all fairness, I was waiting for my shoulder replacement on the left at that time, but that's still no excuse. I wasn't prepared enough for pulling that sled. Even the wall balls, terrible at the wall balls. Still not my best station, but I knew I had to work on my wall balls, that I could actually do it in an appropriate way. And so then the trouble is, you do it once and it gets under your skin. And
so
then,
just jumping in there with that kind of original question, the everyone listening can hear there's like a long history of activity and as you've said, like a background of running, which I think is always a good key to get in there early, because that really, what you've just said, has built the base now for everything that's about to come in your life and that you've now achieved, but also that's about to come in the rest of this episode as well, because I think you've highlighted it there. Running has always been consistent for you, whether it be mental health or just something that you needed to do at the end of a day to have your time, or whether it's been sport related. It's always been part of your world. And then you find yourself at your son-in-law and daughter's gym, where you end up doing a mixed doubles to start your Hyrox career. I mean, just take us back to that moment when you get asked to do it, or you asked to do it, however it went. Tell us the story behind, okay, we're pulling the trigger on this now. We're going to do a mixed doubles. I'm just going to go in head first, because to be fair, Avril, that is pretty head first, I would say.
Yeah, well, it was my daughter was already doing a doubles, and the lads had already got partnered up. And at that time, I didn't have a particular partner. And then I thought, well, my son, because my son's fit, he's a semi-pro boxer. He trains very hard. He'd not heard of Hyrox. And I do have to say, I have to admit this, he never once came to the gym with me to work together, to do, a simulation or anything else like that. So when Chris and I met up on the day, I must add this, I hadn't been feeling too good because I think I was, post-COVID. So not feeling too good. And he said to me, look, you don't have to do this today. And I've never backed out of anything in my life. Said, no, we're still going to do this. And I remember almost hyperventilating with the nerves and thinking, God, I hope I can do this. I hope I can do this. I trained and I knew I could push the sled. It's just I knew in the back of my mind that pulling that sled was going to take some doing. And I had heard people say it can be different on the surfaces that you get at different times and how the carpet is and all of those sort of things. And bearing in mind, I was new to the event and all of the rules that go on as well, and trying to remember the order of the stations and that sort of thing that goes through your head. So when I went in with my son Chris, there was no intention of us getting a fantastic time or anything like that. It was just a matter of let's do this together, a mum and a son. What a great achievement! What will be will be. But I admit, at the end, I felt disappointed, and my disappointment was because I felt I hadn't given my all, because I felt a little bit unwell in myself, and because I couldn't pull that sled. And I have to admit that having to admit you can't do something was hard for me, and it just demonstrates really that how preparation is really so important, so that in your heart, whenever you enter our Hyrox, I might not be able to do it brilliantly, but I know I can do it. It might take me a long time, and fair enough, but I've given it a shot. And I think that's why it's really important to train for it. Yeah.
And timestamp wise, when was that first doubles? What?
That was not last year, the year before. So what are we now? 25, 20, 23. And in Birmingham, it's in Birmingham, 2023.
Birmingham 23, when it was still a one-day event on a Sunday. A Saturday.
I think, it was either a Saturday or a Sunday that we.
Because then they had the relay championships after that, I believe.
Right.
But so really, in terms of like time, it's not.
Yeah, we did it. And we did it. I think it was 118 that we did it in, from what I remembered. But I knew my son was a fast runner, and his speeds were in. And there was sometimes that I was struggling to keep up with him. But by the same token, he pulled that sled all on his own in the end. He said, "Get out of the way, I'll do it." And but we complemented each other then, because I was better on the burpees and even the farmer's carry and the lunges, because he's quite tight in the hamstrings and the Achilles, And for a boxer, they don't have a great deal of bulk in their legs as such. It's all upper, So it was great that he could complement me in that sense. But I have to say, I thought, I can't do it. If I'm going to do another Hyrox, it's not going to be a mix for a while. It's got to be with another woman, or eventually. I never even thought about singles at that point. I thought it's got to be with somebody else. And actually, I did then do a doubles with my coach, Dave Williams' wife, Becky. She's 33. And that was last year. So I would have been 64. Unfortunately, Becky didn't feel too brilliant on that day. I felt really good for a change, and I felt I'd really come from that feeling I could have done even more, But I felt, again, we complemented each other. So again, each working to each other's strengths, really. We worked as a team.
And you mentioned that, actually. You said you were saying about how you wanted to just do another one straight away. You got the bug. I mean, you'll have met a lot of Hyroxes now, and you'll know that's a common thing, that people seem to get hooked on this. And it was true of your journey as well. You did that first one, and then you were hooked. You've done the women's doubles, and you sort of just said there as well, you're solo. You're thinking, oh no, we won't do a solo. And what was the mechanism that then decided, right, let's start putting in the work and let's build towards a solo? What was it that kind of changed that?
Well, I thought, I've done a mixed doubles, I've done a women's doubles, and it's that challenging yourself, irrespective of the age that you are, that, you have to face, it's a fear, don't get me wrong, because there was that fear that I'm not going to be able to do this, the singles on my own. But I thought, as long as I, put my mind to it and train for it, hopefully I'll be able to do it. I was having issues though, Neil, with my right shoulder. I'd had the replacement on the left, a full shoulder replacement, March 2024. And I was hoping that I was going to be ready for the October one in 2024 that I did with Becky, you know, and I was guided by my consultant. I had to introduce him to Hyrox because at the time he didn't know what it was. And then I worked with a physio, and I'm very fortunate. My daughter's also a physio. So I was able to really understand really what I could do, what I was able to do. But I think because I was that determined, I was pushing myself a little bit more. I was in the gym within 2 weeks, but I went on the bike to keep my CV up, if you like, and then gradually building the weights. I knew that I'd lost a lot of strength in that left shoulder, and they've all, you know, they told me it probably can take up to 48 months before you get the same strength back in that shoulder. And so that when I was training for the singles, yes, I'd got my shoulder replacement. I felt good. I'd got more flexibility with it. But the right shoulder has been the one giving me the grief because that was compensating for my left. And now that's unfortunately almost bone on bone. And that's a mixture of arthritis, which is genetic in my family, but also wear and tear over the years with all the weight training and also the dancing, etc. And so, all right, I'd applied for the singles. I was trying to train for it, and I knew that it was coming up in the May, but I knew it was quite painful, and I'd had to back off, if you like, on some of the wall ball training and on some of the burpees because of I didn't want to injure it. I thought, you know, I can go into this in May, and I'll tolerate whatever, you know, discomfort I've got because at least I want to do it. I want to do it. And as a result of not being able to give it the full training that I wanted to, if you like, I couldn't even do a full simulation. I only did a half simulation, working on some of the stations that were my weakest stations as such. So there was still that element of doubt whether I could do a full singles. I'd only ever done a half simulation. And so I was nervous, you know, standing there at the start, thinking, oh my God, I hope I can do this, you know, and I kept saying to myself, you are going to do it. You can do it. You will do it. And really, it was that voice in my head when I was doing the singles thought, you are going to do this. You can do this. You will do this. And I kept trying to say, you know, we have some very hard Hyrox session trainings and hard boot camps. And I think if I can do those and get through those, or if I can get myself through a, you know, 11K, 12K run, and at that time, in all fairness, when I was backing off on some of the Hyrox station aspects of it, I was doing a lot more running because my daughter was training at the same time for the London Marathon. So I was running a lot of distances. So that was increasing, helping with my endurance as well, doing a few more sprints, some tempo training. So I think that helped with it. So it was a matter of, okay, recognizing, can't really concentrate too much on this, but I can concentrate on that, and hopefully that may compensate for me possibly being a bit slower on some of those stations in the singles. And to finish it was great for me. That was the intention. Let me finish this, and great if I could make podium, but never thought for 1 minute that I'd, you know, I'd get first place with it, and I'd actually break a world record with it. And then I was absolutely over the moon with that. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting story actually. We have a version. The Purple Army have a bit of a version of your story because we saw it from our perspective on the sidelines. So I just happened to be on the balcony. So anyone who's been to Olympia will know the setup there, and that there's good bird's eye view of everything really.
Yeah, it's great.
And I was on the balcony, and I kind of saw you come through, and I just happened to be there at that time, and you know the guys on the mic and stuff, and you know how Faisal and Geddy and Gus and all those guys are on the microphones. It's very very exciting, and they're very accommodating, right? And so I saw it, and then as it went, and I didn't tell you this when we met in Chicago, but as it went, I was there with many hats on. I was there as a coach, as a business owner, and as a podcaster as well. But one of the aspects of my coaching job that day was to Carol, who we'll talk about in a minute in a little bit more depth, had kind of said to me, are you going to go to the podium just to like support? So a lady called Wendy, in the 50 to 55 category, got a podium. A couple of other people we knew were on podium. And then there was a couple people we were looking for on the podium and keeping an eye out for anyone, because Carol was in need of a doubles replacement partner. Poor Wendy Williams, unfortunately, had done an injury and was unable to take part in the doubles with Carol in Chicago. And your team around you that day at the podium, I'm sure you've got your own memories of that, and they're probably fond memories. But did we know you were there? Tell you, we knew you were there, and it was brilliant. The atmosphere around you and getting up there on the podium was absolutely fantastic. And it's a great story because at the time we didn't know you. Perhaps the community weren't aware. Whereas since that day, the community of Hyrox, our amazing hybrid community that has evolved from this sport and other sports coming through, people know who you are now, you know, and it was amazing to see I know now it would have been your family that were there and your but I didn't know that at the time. And it was just like, oh wow, look at the support that this lady's got. And you know, it was really inspirational to see that you'd done the world record. And then it kind of just hit me when I was talking to Carol that, you know, and she saw everything in the press from Hyrox from that weekend, and it just hit us that you would be someone that she should ask about the doubles, which we'll get to in a second. But just going back to your world record at Olympia, like what a moment. But did it hit you at the time that A, that meant Chicago qualification, and B, with a world record, that's going to put you in the fight for an actual world title as well? Did that hit you at any point when you were in Olympia, or did it take a while to kind of realize?
It honestly, it never entered my mind. It just never entered my mind. It was only when I was doing the farmer's carry, I heard my son shouting, "Mum, you could beat the world record." I could hear that. But then when I came off that station, that again went out of my mind. I just wanted to finish it at that point because I was absolutely knackered. I just wanted to get it finished. And it wasn't until again then on the war balls, then I can't remember his name now, was in my ear then saying, "You've got 1.5 minutes to beat this world record." And I thought, oh God, you know, although I was dying, I thought, no, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. But getting over that line, and then when they came running up on the top, it was my son-in-law came up with my granddaughter on his shoulders and just said, "You broke the world record. You broke the world record, and you did it with one extra lap. You ran an extra lap." And I said, I wasn't aware, and I'm glad they didn't tell me because I think that would have put me off. So I'm glad that I didn't know that at the time. And it was just that in itself was just, for me, just such an overwhelming feeling of achievement. And the fact that the people that had come, my daughter, my son-in-law, my son, his partner, 5 guys from the gym, girls came from the gym that weren't even competing, just to watch me. And then Dave was there and his wife. And it was just so wonderful seeing their exhilaration with my achievement. My achievement was also their achievement. And it was just absolutely, if you could bottle that, you'd be one of the richest people in the world. The feeling was absolutely amazing. And when I came home, it was like, yeah, I broke the world record. My son, which is, you know, lads, I don't think demonstrate their kind of emotions that openly and stuff. But he was on the phone for ages saying how proud he was of me and start to believe in myself and all of the rest of it. And that was lovely. And then it wasn't until a couple of days later, the emails, I was checking my emails, and I saw this email and said, "You are invited to the World Championships." And I sat back and I thought, I'm going to read this again because I think they've got this wrong, actually. So fortunately, my daughter only lives 5 doors around from me. So I went running around with my laptop and said, look at this. And then she said, "Oh, Mum, it's great. It's brilliant." I said, "But I can't go." She said, "What do you mean you can't go?" I said, "For 2 things. I can't afford it with 4 weeks notice. And secondly, I haven't flown long haul for, it must be about 16, 17 years. And I'm not the best flyer in the world either. And not only that, I just thought going to a big city, doing a world championship, not knowing a soul, I knew Gaz and Dave would be there, but it frightened the hell out of me, Neil. It did, honestly. It really, really did. And my daughter said, Mum, but you've got to think about this. You know, one way or another, we'll get the money to get you there. And then later on, my granddaughter came downstairs, my little granddaughter, 6 years old, and she looked at me and she said, Nanny, you've got to go. And that said, we will do this. And you know what, Neil, I've been so lucky that the community that I trained with, they all raised the funds to get me to Chicago. I felt very humble, you know. At first, I didn't want it because I've looked after myself, you know, paid my own way always, you know, never relied on anybody else financially. And this was hard for me to initially accept. And like the people at the gym had said, you know, this is because it's you, Av. You know, you are our inspiration, and you've got to do this also, you know, because you have achieved this. It's a great opportunity, and it doesn't matter whether you win or not, but the fact that you've actually been invited to the World Championships is an amazing achievement. So I had them behind me 110%, and seeing that the funds that they were raising and the lengths they were going to raise that money, honest to God, I was so emotional that week. Every time I saw anybody, I would burst into tears because it was just so humbling. It was like a film. Do you know what I mean? All people coming together to pay money, strangers even then, you know, were giving money, and wishing me the best of luck. It was just an absolute incredible journey, even at that point, before I'd even got to Chicago. And
yeah,
then,
I've got a couple of questions there.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, there's a couple of questions just to ask on top of that, really, where you know, you talk about strangers and people just giving that money and how humble you felt. But at this point in your life, could you believe what was happening? Did you think this would happen at this stage in your life?
Oh gosh, no. It was all completely surreal. And you know what? Nearly a week, I was having to force myself to eat because my tummy kept doing these cartwheels. It was just, oh God. And I knew I had to eat with the training because I thought I've got 4 weeks now, 4 weeks to really work on, again, those weaker areas, which I knew what they were, the sled pull and the wall balls. I knew I'd got to work on that, work on my technique with Dave. And the whole thing still, I felt like I was in a dream. I thought I was going to wake up and say to my daughter, you know what, now I've had the most random dream. You'll never guess. I dreamt that I went to Olympia, did a singles, and I went and I actually got a world record. And then I was invited to this world championship, and all people were raising money. It was just like a dream. And you know, and even part of it now still seems surreal. You know, I've actually put my Team England t-shirt on today for the first time. It was hanging in my bedroom. I thought I'm going to put that on today whilst I talk to Neil on this podcast. Gives it some realization, you know. Yeah. And it still feels very, very surreal. Honest to God, if somebody was trying to write a scene about this, they'd say, "Oh, it's too wishy-washy. It's just too. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm stuck for words now, and that's very rare in my vocabulary. But it's just unbelievable in a way. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, things don't happen like that, you know.
No,
but
I think there's this kind of like feeling that I get listening to your story from not just our like interactions that we are having now or that we had in Chicago when we met, but I mean like listening to the whole story. And that's something that I wondered about for a few weeks there leading up to Worlds, is that there was a certain amount of limelight that comes with this achievement of the world record and, you know, this world championship qualification. And you've described it as surreal, but all of a sudden, you know, the Rad Chicks podcast, our fellow podcasters, they wanted to talk to you. People wanted to talk to you. Brands wanted to get behind you. Things started to happen that probably two, you know, a week before Olympia, you just wouldn't have believed were going to be a thing, right? But then it just became, the attention was there, and we were able to we'll get on to the next part in a second, but we were able to ask you the question we had for you because of that attention and because we happened to see you on the day. How did that feel, having that kind of, there's a limelight there. How did that feel?
In a way, it kind of like added a little bit more pressure, because I felt that eyes are on me now and there's going to be an expectation. Whereas before, it didn't really matter, did it? Really, what I did, what I raced, what time I achieved, or whether I even finished it. But now I felt that there was an expectation of me. And it's very hard then when people meet you and talk to you, just to put into words what you've gone through to get where you've got. And there's a lot of people out there that will have overcome all the stresses and strains that face them in modern living, and the things that go on in their lives. And it just seemed that this was just such a wonderful thing to happen in my life, that I wanted to treasure it. And the fact that other people had taken notice of it, it was also for someone, I say, of my age. I mean, age is, and I do say this, it is just a number. But it was just great to be able to say, to everybody out there that, you can still achieve your goals at this stage. You can still look at this, what I've achieved at this stage in my life. So anything is possible. Just, carry on with trying to achieve what you want to achieve. In my case, when I raced at Olympia, it was to complete a solo, a singles. I'm talking in dance terms now, a singles. But I do have to share one thing with you. On my wall in my kitchen, the year before, it was in a women's health magazine. There had been, I think it's Celia, who had got a world record, and she was in that magazine. And again, I read it because I like reading editorials like that, and I thought, good for you. But I then got a piece of A4 paper, and I wrote on that, and you could still see it on my calendar in my kitchen now. I wrote on that, I'm going to take that world title from you. I'm going to take that world record from you, and I'm going to achieve this. And I had that clipped on my board, and that I would look at that calendar nearly every single day, because I had to look at my calendar because I've got a memory like a sieve. And that was also inspiring me. And even before I went to Chicago, my little granddaughter, the 6, got on one of the stools and she wrote on it, "You can do this, Nanny."
What
And
a good
it's
story.
yeah,
That's
and
really cool.
Yeah, it's still there. It was like years and years ago. I was after a car. I loved the car when the 350Zs came out, and the Nissan 350Zs, and I had that because I used to be a senior lecturer at the university, and I had it on my wall in my office, and I put, "I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy this," and I had it there on my wall. And eventually, I did get it. I got it with all the Nismo kit and everything else like that, and it was just, I loved it when I used to drive that car. Broke my heart when I had to sell it because of my divorce. But anyway, that's by the by.
Yeah, no, do you know what? That's a really good story, Avril. I think, for anyone listening or watching, if they don't know who Celia Duff is, badass gran, then where the hell have you been? Because she was someone that sort of broke through as an older athlete and showed everyone the way, and was one of the trailblazers with people like Carol and Wendy and Peter and those guys, to show that Hyrox is not just for the kids here. It's not all about Gen Z. It's about everyone. And for you to tell that story, that's really cool. Like that for me is what it's all about. Somebody does something, and the inspiration that you see from it, and you write down, I'm going to go for that and take that title. And we've had a few moments where we just we could have gone on to the title, but we're going to pause that for 1 second and ask one more question and go back just a tiny little bit, where you say your granddaughter comes down and says, "You've got to go to Chicago." So you've made the decision, you've paid, you've committed to the solo, and you're in, and you're going to Chicago. And then some random person called Carol decides to contact you. Do you want to tell us your perspective of that? Obviously, we're well aware over this side on the Purple Army of what happened. But why don't you tell us sort of your perspective? You've committed, you're in, you're going to do a solo, and then
then I got a message on Instagram. And by the way, I was new to Instagram, and probably everybody realizes this because I'm really not very good doing it and using it, but I am learning. Another goal. But I received this message from Carol to say, she explained about Wendy's injury, which is very sad under the circumstances because she'd earned that place. God love her. And asking, would I consider, doubling up with her in Chicago for the women's doubles? And initially I thought, oh God, it's one thing doing a singles out there and then going and doing a doubles with somebody I hadn't trained with, that lives the other side of the country, that it was unlikely we were going to get together to train together. And I said, as long as it's after my singles, because I didn't want to put my singles race at risk in that sense. But I said I'd be more than happy to give it a go, bearing in mind that, singles and then a doubles, I couldn't guarantee how I would feel on a day doing a doubles after doing a singles. But I was also very flattered that Carol had asked me, really. And so I thought, no, come on again. And this is it's an opportunity again to prove ourselves that I can do singles, but I can still do a doubles, and I can do another doubles with somebody that I've not even trained with, that I don't even know that well, actually. And it was great then because I got to know Carol a little bit via WhatsApp. We were talking, and again, we talked about our strengths and our weaknesses. And it was only the week before that we went that we talked a little bit about strategy. So I hadn't met Carol in person till I actually got to Chicago. And I don't know whether you remember, it's only because I was sitting at a bar area waiting for registration that you guys walked past, and I noticed Carol out the corner of my eye because I recognised her face, and I shouted, Carol! And that was it. That was the first time I'd ever met Carol.
No, that was a lovely moment for us in Chicago because we were bowling down the, anyone who went to Chicago to the World Champs will understand what we mean by the long walk down the pier.
Oh, it was.
And it was a long walk, and it was lined with bars and food outlets and everything there was really to do there. And just heard your voice, and the minute we heard your voice, we knew it was you. And then we had a lovely moment where we met and all had a chat, and then we walked up the pier and we actually did the registration together, right?
Yeah. And I was just so glad because I felt like a lost soul. I didn't know anybody because Dave and Gaz, who were doing the pro doubles, Dave's my coach, they weren't flying in until the Thursday. And even going over to Chicago, I was staying initially with people that I'd never met before either, but I flew with a friend who she's become a friend because she's the mum of one of my daughter's best friends. And so I didn't feel like I knew a lot of people. And certainly because I'm not really known to the Hyrox community, it wasn't like I could, rock up. You guys knew everybody when you were walking along. It was, and I felt like a right lemon at time because I had no idea half the time who you were speaking to. And that was that was great. And it was lovely that you were able, so many people knew you and knew Carol, and that was lovely. And it helped me feel a bit more comfortable, I have to say, and I'll thank you both for that, because I did feel a little bit out of my depth, really, at that point, and very nervous, actually. I was very nervous.
You could probably tell how much we actually loved it as well. Like we're like in our element in that environment, just the community, the people, the sport, everything about it we love. And dear, your version there is really cool because if anything we did help, then fantastic. And I think that's the Hyrox community in general, though. You'll have learned that over that weekend how it really was. And it probably became that people started to recognize who you were as the weekend went on as well. Especially the Brits. There would have been people that pointed you out, people we knew. They were like, oh, look, it's the world record holder from Olympia. She's here. And people noticed it, which was really cool. And what I wanted to sort of fast forward to was the walking of nations. And that moment, like, what did it kind of feel like to be at a world championships probably something you didn't really vision would ever happen.
No. Again, I was very fortunate because I recognised Carol. I was disappointed because I hadn't got my T-shirt at the time, because although I'd got my singles T-shirt, I think you were there when there'd been the mix-up about the doubles T-shirt, and they said I had to go back for. And because I was initially staying outside of Chicago, I didn't want to then, we were coming back in, we were going into Chicago, and I didn't want to carry a T-shirt around me all day on the basis that I might lose it. And I just was too embarrassed to wander around all day in a Team England T-shirt. So they had told me I could pick up my T-shirt that day. Surprise, surprise, got there and they told me no. And so I was so disappointed that I couldn't walk with everybody else with my T-shirt. So I was just walking around in my sports top. And then I felt more comfortable, as I say, because I saw Carol, because again, all of the nations were all getting together. Didn't know anybody. I recognised a couple of faces that I'd seen at Olympia run. I didn't know their names. But it was just, it was just, I couldn't believe I was part of it. It was absolutely crazy. It's just, I just thought, God, this is just also real. If I could really just capture all this, because I was also having, you were aware of this, I was having issues with my phone. And so that some of it I didn't even get to capture. But then when walking through it, I always felt quite emotional. It was really emotional. And I'd really wished that my family had been there, that had been with me at Olympia to treasure this as well. I could only, you can tell people, you can try and describe it, but that feeling was absolutely amazing. And seeing all the other athletes walking around, and seeing how proud they were, it was absolutely great. But also it gave us the opportunity to see the actual course itself and the inside of it. And you looked at it and thought, well, God, this is big. This is big. But that was, yeah, that was crazy. That was again a very memorable experience. Yeah.
And then the race day itself. So that was a late night on the Thursday night. We were all in there for the Elite 15 races and the walk-in of nations, followed by the elite races. Obviously, I stayed for the whole thing. I think a lot of athletes probably left after the ladies' race because it was, it was too tight for their race the next morning, really. So we turn up and there you are, and you guys are on first. You were the first wave. Your age category was the first wave, and Carol's age category was the second wave. So we're all there. The venue was fairly quiet. I felt, obviously very easily said when you're not competing, but I felt it brought like a tranquility to it. It felt quite relaxed in there compared to a Hyrox. But I think that was because it was the first wave, and maybe every Hyrox in the first wave feels like that. I don't know. But what did you think? Did you feel like it felt calm?
Yeah, I still felt very nervous, though always those pre-nerves, I always definitely get them. And I felt they were multiplied purely because of the championships. But yes, the environment itself was calming. I thought the warm-up area was good. It didn't feel so busy, and because you can also sense other people's nerves usually. And so that was calming. The environment was nice. The walk down to where we had to start, that got a little bit confusing at first where we were going. But it did have a strange sense about it, but it obviously it soon got busy. I think, by the time we were into the started on the second laps, it started to get busy then, really. But it was, yeah, I was trying to take it in, Neil, as well, because I think that was the thing that everybody said to me: enjoy it, take it all in. This is an experience that you may never get again. It's an opportunity to don't just think about the end result, think about the there and now. And that's what I was trying to do as well. And I was trying to say to myself, keep yourself calm, keep yourself focused, but look around you. You're in a world championship here. It was again, it comes back to that very, very surreal sort of it was just all still very surreal. I felt like I'm going to wake up in a minute and dreams continued. You know, I'm now on a start line for the World Championships, and I'm going to wake up any minute and think, oh God, I woke up, I don't know what the outcome was.
And there must be like a bit of an element where you went into it and you've started that race and you're the world record holder. So at any point, that sounds brilliant. And I love your story there that you were taking it in. That's really, I think it's really important. People don't do that in life, but that's another discussion. But like, you're in there. Did it cross your mind that because you were a world record holder that you had a very decent shot at the podium and a pretty good shot at being the world champion?
Part of me, I did say to my coach, I don't want to know other people's times. My intention is now, I have got an intention now, I want to break my own record. If breaking that record puts me on a podium or makes me a world champion, then that's going to be a bonus. And I knew that I would be disappointed if I didn't beat my time, because I knew that what was in my favor, because I'd done an extra lap at Olympia. And that was the other thing, Neil, was trying to stay focused, because I kept saying to myself, I was getting myself into a state a bit before it, the night before it, because they'd changed the course, hadn't they? And then I was thinking, right, I've got to work this out with these laps. And I thought, I've got to be really, really focused on this. So I thought, if I'm good with my laps, don't get any penalties, then I could be in a position to actually beat my own time. And that was my intention. I wanted, in my heart of hearts, because of what everybody had done to get me to Chicago, I wanted to bring those flags home. I wanted to bring those titles home, not just for myself, but also for them, because they believed in me. And I said one way or another, I'd done this little bit beforehand. I'd read Paul McKenna, the hypnotist. I found a book of his in the Works bookshop place, you know, and I'd started reading that about confidence and things like that, and about trying to remain calm. And then I also read about, you know, again, this belief, and I said, and I'd written on my calendar that I wanted that title. And as I was running, when you are tired, different points, and you probably have experienced this yourself, and every athlete has, you do have your points where you think, oh my God, I don't know whether I'm going to do this, you know, or I'm really, really tired. And I was talking to myself, and I actually was saying out loud, and if anybody was passing me, they probably thought I was absolutely nuts. And I was saying, if you want this flag, if you want this world record, you've got to bust your ass. You keep going, you keep running. And it was only when I got to, well, obviously you're aware of all the controversy about the sleds and the, you know, the new surface. When I got to that sled and I couldn't push it, I was completely and utterly surprised, because I trained with heavier weights than that, and I knew I should be able to push that sled, and I thought something's not right here. And then my coach Dave shouting, get lower, to trying to get to push this. And then the judges saying, you, because it kept lifting at the front, it just kept lifting as I was trying to push it and getting lower. And that felt like I was pushing a men's weight sled. And I was so fatigued coming off that because of all the effort that I'd put into that. And I remember thinking to myself as I came off that and did that first lap, I thought, you know, this could affect me getting breaking my record, because I'm really, really tired. I'm really tired. My legs feel heavy after that, and they shouldn't do, not that heavy at this stage. But I was saying, come on, you've got to push yourself. You've got to push yourself, forget it, move on. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, I hope that sled moves when I'm going to pull it, because I've had the trouble pushing it now. Fortunately for me, again, I trained on some heavier pulls, and I did manage to pull it. My time wasn't as good as my normal time, but I don't know whether I'd then pick that up. I think, you know, I still haven't done any proper analysis of my race yet, you know, believe it or not, but I'd hope I'd pick it up on the runs. But I think it was also wonderful in one respect, because we had got so many judges there on the first day, and because I managed to get ahead of people, and I was first on almost every station then. I knew then that when I got to the war balls, which is my weakest, and I'll be the first to admit that, and when I look back at some of the stuff, I'm getting deep enough, but leaning forward, I think that was fatigue, because I knew my shoulders should have been much further back. But I knew at least then I had a bit of a head start on others with the war balls to be taking my time. But I do have to say, really, at this stage, I couldn't knock those judges. They were strict. They were, you know, having words in my ears about some bits and pieces, but they were strict. but they were also inspirational. You know, I'd got written on the back of my hand, believe. So when I'm down in them on them burpees and I'm getting my breath, you know, the judge had said to me, look at your hand, look at your hand, you know, and they're there to obviously judge what you're doing to ensure there's consistency and fairness in what's happening within a race. They don't have to be that inspiring if they don't want to be. But I have to say, every judge that I came across during my race in the singles and also in the doubles were great, were very inspiring and very motivating. And when I was running that race, it was a mixture of their inspiration, their motivation, people that were watching, and yourself included, your encouragement when you do those laps, people shouting, come on. And even, you know, I remembered the Scottish guy that was there in his kilt, that was there for his mum, that was cheering you on, you know, and that's what's wonderful. Other athletes from other countries were cheering you on, which was wonderful, you know. And I think that I thought I stood a chance then of winning it, but I'm wondering, will I break my record though? Will I break my record? Because that sled push and that sled pull was a lot harder than I'd anticipated it was going to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, as you're describing it there, Faisal on the mic was brilliant because we were one wave behind you. So myself, sort of watching you on the runs, as you mentioned, and I saw you on the runs and a couple of stations, but really I was trying to stream Carol's race for our guys back home at the gym.
Yeah, understandably, yeah.
And I just remember you being on your final run and Faisal on the microphone saying, our first athlete, Avril from the UK, current world record holder, has left the lunges, and if she goes for it, she's on for breaking her record. I remember him saying that.
Oh right, I didn't hear that, but yeah.
And that's the point, right? You the chances of you hearing that, I guess, in that moment were probably pretty slim. But when you got into the wall balls, obviously, you know, Faisal, face of Hyrox, we've had him on the show, good friend of ours now, big supporter of everyone, and obviously there's going to be some bias towards the British when he's at the world champs in terms of like in that area, but he was straight over to you, right, as soon as you came in. And he was giving it a lot of encouragement, and you know, just describe those last 10 wall balls for me. In fact, and I've only seen video evidence of this, the last rep took 2 or 3 reps, did it?
2 or 3 reps, yeah. Yeah, it did. And then when you think you've got that last one done, you think, oh, thank God for that. And then when they say, no, another one, no, another one, you've got that, God, that lack of breath then at that point, because you are so fatigued at that point. Your adrenaline has kept you going, and you know you're nearing the end. It just seemed to go on and on. And I think that's, and I have seen the end reel of that. And I see when eventually I just take a deep breath, and because I'm saying to myself, get on with it. But I think the reason why I paused was so, compose yourself, get this last one done. Come on, girl, come on. Yeah, he was great, actually. He was great. And trying to be, again, advisory as well. You know, it was just keep your eye on the target. Just keep your eye on the target. And at sometimes when I'd got a bit too far forward, I got too close to it. And still I'm aware that, you know, I've got more work to do on that. And I've definitely got more work to do on that if I'm doing the pro weights with it. The pro, God, can talk about that in a bit.
So fast forward, you go over the line and you're world champion. And I get, you know, I get it that things won't sink in for people initially. So I'm just going to fast forward you a little bit further into the day and take us into the ceremony hall and where the shop and everything else was for Hyrox. Yeah. And I'm going to compliment Hyrox massively here because they deserve credit. They get so much stick about so many things, and they deserve some credit where it's due. And the way they did the ceremonies this year at Worlds was fantastic. It's never been poor. It's never been under underdone. It just this year was a different level, and obviously the building would have lent itself to that. I get that because of the stage and everything else, but what a moment. And just tell us about you being called up there to go on the podium, and not only called up there, but what had never been done before for age group was they'd never stuck the big flag behind you with the national anthem. I mean, that was, yeah. Hairs stand up on the arms right now, talking about it and remembering that moment. How did it feel? Tell everyone that moment.
Oh God. Do you know what? Because I'd got nothing to compare to, because I'd never been to a championship before. And when I stood on that podium, and then they played the anthem, I'm going to burst into tears. I'm actually going to cry. And it was also seeing the other people out there that, you know, I could see you guys out there. You can't even, but if you could bottle it, you could bottle that. Oh, it was just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. It was like Christmas. It was like birthdays. It was like all of the wonderful achievements that you've had in your life all bottled into one. Because I've won awards in the past. Don't get me wrong, I have won awards, but this in itself was just absolutely incredible. And again, it was one I thought, oh, I just so wish my daughter and my son and all of my family were here to actually see this, to really appreciate this, you know, because David kindly filmed it. You guys had filmed it. But I just thought, I wish you were here to treasure this moment, because this is just fantastic. It was just, I think anybody would have been proud. Would have been proud, really. And it was, as you say, to see the UK flag there behind me and to play the anthem. That was brilliant. It was great.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it was absolutely brilliant. And you know, what's that famous quote? Life is not measured by the number of breaths that we take, but by the moments that take our breath away.
I love that.
And it's like, in that moment, it was like, that quote came in my head, because I was like, God, for these people, what a moment. And for, you know, it was a couple of days later and we didn't know at that stage. And don't worry about the doubles. We're going to cover that in the next episode with Carol anyway. But it's like, we didn't know that moment was coming for us as a coach, as a friend, as a supporter. But to stand and watch you have that moment, who we'd only really met a day or two before, you know, it was special. And the national anthem, and it was the first one, and it was just, it was mad to watch from our perspective. But you know, from what you're saying there, it's something that will just stay with you, right?
I felt, I now know what it feels for these athletes that go to the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics and everything else, that have worked so hard to achieve their medals. I mean, my goodness, you know, what they do to get where they've got. And I can understand now, when you've watched them on their podiums and they play the anthem and they're very tearful and emotional, I can understand that now, why that means so much to them. And it does make everything all worthwhile. And I thought about all the people back at home, and I'm going to get emotional now thinking about it. Oh God, thinking you guys put me here, and this is for you. You know, I've achieved this because of you. You know, and I thought I wouldn't be here now if it weren't for all the people back home. Sorry about that. I apologise, but
tears on the podcast is always good.
Yeah, you know, it was breathtaking, and I just thanked everybody in my head. I just thank you everybody, because this is all for you. You know, I'm just so glad I can bring this home for you guys.
That's
just
awesome.
such a special moment. Yeah, it's something I'll always treasure. Yeah, and I love that quote, by the way. You'll have to send it to me.
I'll send it to you, definitely. So from there, I mean, we could go on for ages, but you know, in our next episode that's coming up next week, we'll be focusing in on your doubles with Carol. We're going to talk to Carol in depth about it. But from your perspective, you've become world champion. You've got the little golden kettlebell, which again, another great learn from Hyrox, by the way, for anyone who saw the press last year and all of the faff over the kettlebells. They've learned, they've moved it on, and they've done really well, and they deserve credit for that. You've got your kettlebell, you've got your flag, you've got your gold medal.
Yeah.
And then you've got a race to do in less than 48 hours. And you took that start line with Carol. And I just want to kind of get your, your overview of what went on. And then we'll talk to Carol, like I said, more in the next episode, and tune in for that as well. But I think from your perspective, how did it go? Because from my perspective, it was dramatic.
Yeah, that was a race. That is really what you call a race. And I remember saying to Carol, and I don't mean any offense to the Americans, by the way. I need to tell you that now. But I said, we can't let the Americans beat us. We can't let the Americans beat us. And I think because Carol and I had run the course before, at least we now had an idea of where things were. You weren't, and you had an idea of the actual laps that you were doing. So I think we felt more comfortable in that respect. What neither of us knew going into that race was how we were going to really pan out, because of the fact we'd never done another Hyrox so close to another Hyrox. And I said to Carol, all we can do is do our best, but we are going to do our best. And I think it was that affirmation again. I kept saying, we will do this. We will do this. And I think we were both driven. I wanted in my heart, I was very fortunate. I'd managed to get my world record and the world championship. And I wanted so much Carol to come home with that flag. I really, really did. And that title. And I was going to do my darndest to help her do that. That was it, driven by that again. And I think, again, we complemented each other. I suppose if I'm fair, it's fair to say, I knew that her wall balls were going to be shit hot. I've seen her wall balls; they're really good, far better than my wall balls. And I knew that's where she was going to excel for us. But I remember being a little bit frustrated on some of the runs, because I could see that Carol was tired at points, but that's what you do as a team buddy. You keep inspiring each other. And then when we were catching the Americans on those stations, I was thinking, come on, Carol, we can do this. And certainly then, because I think they thought they'd got it in the bag, I think, at that point, because they were ahead with on the runs. And then when we then came to that final bit in the catching them up on the burpees and catching them up on the lunges, I thought, if this is going to kill me, we're going to catch you. And then on those wall balls, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It was such a close race that I think it was such an exciting race for everybody else to witness as well. And it was just such a fantastic feeling when that 100, because I couldn't see from where I was how far ahead we were, because I'm standing there then by the time I'd done my few, and I could hear you shouting, Avril, just 10, Avril, just 10. And I knew I was just going to do a 10 because I knew she was faster, passing it across. And it was just, come on, Carol. And then crossing that line and seeing her emotion, God love her. She collapsed on the floor. She was breaking her heart. It was just, and then I was apologising because I'd been shouting, I'd been screaming, because you do. And I think everybody has to understand that when you're really full of adrenaline. I said, I'm sorry if I shouted at you and all the rest of it. But oh my God, we've won. And it was just such an elation. And I was just so thrilled that we could say, two people that had never met each other before, 4 weeks previous, never met each other, would come to Chicago as a doubles. And we still managed to do it as a team. We brought that flag home, and it was brilliant, Neil. It was brilliant. I was just absolutely thrilled to bits. It was the icing on the cake. And I just think that sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I just think I was just absolutely thrilled for myself, of course, but doubly thrilled for Carol as well, to be able to do that. And also for us to be able to do it for Wendy, because I had to remember as well, Wendy had earned her stripes getting to Chicago, and unfortunately had that injury. But it was also a privilege and for Carol to ask me to step in. And And it was just great that I was able to deliver for her, and that we were both able to deliver on the day, because neither of us knew, as I say, would know how we were going to be, given the fact that we'd raced our hearts out in our singles race before. But I don't know what it was, you know, I actually was full of beans. I was just full of beans. It was just, yeah, I felt great. Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
I reckon from a coach's perspective and from a kind of, so I was emotionally involved at many levels. I said on my live feed, I said, we are completely biased towards Carol and Avril here. You know, I was very clear on that, and I was very emotionally involved as like a long-term friend of Carol's. You know, I'm Carol's friend, I'm a coach, I'm a boss. You know, we've got a great relationship, and we've been through a lot together. Not just in Hyrox sense, but in our own lives as well. And I think sort of the emotion was there for me, but from a coaching perspective, when I was watching everything that you were doing on the runs where you pushed, and everything that you and Carol did in each station to not let that gap open. So the gap would open sometimes on the runs, but you'd bring it back and you get extremely close to them again in the stations. And everything that you laid down set that moment in the wall balls up. And without every little detail that you guys put in throughout that race, you'd have never been in the position to have set up that finale without the hard work that you put in as a team together. And I think the emphasis on like togetherness and team and Hyrox as a community, and it being about celebration and everyone, like you guys, if there was ever a perfect race, you guys summed that up, because you summed everything up about what everything is about in this industry when it comes to community and togetherness and team in that exact moment, because it couldn't have come together any better, and it led to an epic finale. And you talk about having, you know, that feeling of nearly having to apologize to Carol on the finish line there, and but it's that attitude and that mindset and that adrenaline that makes you the world champions that you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. God, yeah, absolutely. And I think I just said, Carol, we did it. And it was, and I think even the photographs that you can see, the elation on our faces, they're not the most flattering, but you can see, almost feel that elation by looking at our faces, how elated we were. Because when I think about it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, I don't think the Americans did any single races prior to that. So I thought these are going to be fresh. They're going to be fresh into this. You know, we've got two other athletes here that have done singles, as you said, only 48 hours before that one. I think it was slightly less than 40 hours, wasn't it? But anyway, we had no idea. We just, but there was fire in our belly. There was definitely that fire in our belly, and I think that element of competition. Because sometimes when you're doing a normal Hyrox race, you just, if you like, competing with yourself, you're competing with your own times to get that personal best. But because we could see it, we could see our competitors, if you like, we could see how close or how far that they were. And also in our proximity, and in some cases, sometimes they were taking up our space, and had to, you know, remind them sometimes you're obstructing us here, you know, which was a little bit unfair. But knowing that they could be ahead on those runs, I think it was just, again, just shouting, think about that podium. You want to bring that flag home? Come on, we can do this. We can do this. And I just remember screaming that, if you want this flag, run, come on, we've got this. And then bless her, because I'm thinking, I'm saying as I'm running along in my last lap, come on, dear Lord, because I say to Carol, I talk to myself, by the way, Carol, you'll have to ignore me. But I was also saying to Carol, come on, Carol, we've got this. And I remember running on that last lap and saying, Carol, come on now. You're the whiz kids when it comes to this wall balls. You've got to do your utmost on this. Come on, we could do this. And sure enough, she did. And I couldn't be prouder. It was a phenomenal race. And as you say, Neil, I think for anybody that was watching it, that knew us, you know, that knew Carol and I, the adrenaline that you must have been going through at that time must have been, you know, off the chart because it was so close.
We were shattered, and God knows how Alice and Sammy actually ran their race an hour later. Because their emotion was so big, but they managed to actually run their race an hour later. So,
bless them.
Yeah, but I mean, it was phenomenal. So, but like I said, on the next episode, if you're listening to this as we release next week's episode, or if you're going back through the episodes, the next episode, we are talking to Carol about that doubles race in depth as well. So we'll get some finer details about it there as well, and Carol's perspective. But for us to kind of round this off, Avril, talk to me about what's next. What's the future for you in this sport, and what's next? What's the next season look like for you?
Well, as you're aware, initially trying to get tickets for Hyrox has been difficult. I didn't get anything for Birmingham. I've managed to get for London. Unfortunately, they've both turned up because I'd actually arranged for singles, and I wanted to do a doubles with my daughter, because that had always been one of my intentions, to do a doubles with Natalie. But they're both on the same day, can you believe? So we're still up in arms about what's happening with that. But obviously now we've had the change to the rules, haven't we? Which is kind of like put a bit of a scupper on it, really, because if I want to try and get to another World Championships, I'm going to have to do the pro weights, which is going to take some doing, because I'm aware of the fact that, you know, I have my issues with my shoulders. But you know what? If I'm going to try and give it a go, I'm just going to have to up my training and see how we get on. So I was looking after I was in the bathroom with my two granddaughters, and this was after the rules had come out, because I've got an open in London, and I can try and protect my world record with that, because the idea would be now to still break my world record, Neil. That's what I'd like to do. But that's going to have to be open weights, isn't it, now? Because I'm now going into the pros. It's going to be a new ball game altogether. But then I was concerned, my daughter particularly was concerned, there's going to be an influx of people now applying for the pro tickets so that they can get an opportunity that, you know, potentially they could get to a world championship. And so she came upstairs and she said, I've got you a ticket for Madrid in November. And I'm there counting, how many months is that I can probably, and I will admit this to you, Neil, because the last time I used a 6 kilogram ball, as I said, was doubles with my son, and I was rubbish. And I was in the gym last night, and I got there a bit early, and I thought, first thing I did was pick up a 6 kilogram ball, threw it at the target, and missed it. In fact, it came back and smacked me straight on the head. And I thought, this is going to take some work here. So I know I've got to work on my posterior chain. I know that to strengthen that, and work on my upper body to try and strengthen that, hoping that my shoulders will take it. I know that's where it's going to be, but my goal is to enter pro, a new challenge. We shall see how we get on with that one, won't we? Really, but I don't know what's going to happen with London, because I think there's a lot of people making inquiries about their tickets now that have already booked open. You know, that feel now, you know, it does mean that they won't potentially.
There was no pro division for people to enter into. So what happens? Are they just racing open for the hell of it? And don't get me wrong, the whole episode has been very focused on the top end of our sport. I get that, but there are going to be men and women in your age category that just want to race, and achieving a Hyrox will be a brilliant thing for them, and it'll be a brilliant thing. Of course it will, and that should be celebrated. So there is the place for the open, of course, but for what I would hate to think, and I'd like your opinion on it, is I'd hate to think that Hyrox would assume that nobody in that category wants to try and get to Worlds, because people do actually set out to get to Worlds. So those that entered Excel and Birmingham before the rule change, they entered, some of them, Carol, for example, entered to try and get to Worlds. So is that just like a throwaway ticket now because she bought the flex option? Does she sell it? You know, what is the what is it that Hyrox want those people to do? And I would argue it's a small amount of people.
Yeah.
Because if they're 59 or younger, they already tried to enter the pro to qualify because they knew that. But
Yes.
there's a group of people in 2 of the age categories now, yours and
Yeah.
Carol's, that want to qualify for Worlds. But
Yeah.
they already entered a race under the pretenses that was going to be the case.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I think the sooner that we hear about that from Hyrox, the better, because then people can make decisions accordingly, really. Because it does and will make a difference, because it is, because it also makes a difference again to your train. Don't get me wrong, Neil, I do train with heavier weights, where I feel that my shoulders would take that. But I know that this is not just going to be wanting to, this is going to be now a need to. And I am in a way fearful that my shoulders won't take it. But in another way, I think to myself, well, okay, if you've made these rules now, let some of us show that we can do those pro weights. We are worthy of going to a world championship like everybody else, and I certainly hope, and I would stand fast with all of the people that are in our age categories, 60 to 69 now, to say, we can all give it a shot. We might not have the fastest times because of the increase in the weights, but at least, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go and show our worth, really, because we're still athletes in our own right, irrespective of our age. And in some respects, we have to work a little bit harder, and also our recovery is a lot longer, and we're going to potentially be more prone to injuries. We have to accept that. But I would say, okay, it's going to be another challenge for me, Neil. So that's where I'm going for now, aiming for Madrid, but also waiting to hear what Hyrox have to say about, Excel. Really, am I still going to be in a position where I still enter an open, and just think, well, okay, let's just try and just break my record in the open, because obviously the same applies in the doubles with my daughter, because I've entered open with my daughter. I didn't enter doubles, pro with my daughter, and that would also mean changing that to pro, because if I'm going to do pro single, why would I not do pro double when you share it, really? So that'll be interesting to see, and I think the sooner that Hyrox let people know where they stand with that, I think it's for the better, really, and it's only fair that we do know sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. So a world-class episode from a double world champion, which has been awesome to kind of get your perspectives and understand where you were in your head with all of those things, and watching it in the flesh unravel, if you like, is very different to understanding how someone actually felt. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Avril. So if people are watching or listening, where is it that they can follow this journey? Because you've clearly got a path ready for the next season. So if people want to follow that, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Savage at 65 on Instagram. You can contact me there, and I'm more than happy to respond to any of your messages, guys. Just bear with me, because, like I said, I'm no Instagram expert, but will do my best. And I just want to thank those that are already following me. It's very kind of you, and I want to thank all of those of you that have sent some lovely best wishes and congratulatory comments, and those that have said, I've been an inspiration to them. That means the world to me, because that's also very important to me. And I want to thank you. And Neil, I want to thank you ever so much, because you were so encouraging out there in Chicago, and Carol at the time when we first met, absolutely brilliant. And I believe in fate. Fate brought us together. That was fate, and it was meant to be. And it's been also a privilege today to talk to you on your podcast, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. It's been great to relive it and chew it all over, and it was awesome and an honor to be part of the team on the day as well. So no, thank you as well.
Thank you.
So to everyone that has listened and watched today, I just want to say thanks for tuning into our show. Do what I always say: like, comment, share. Anyone who you think might want to listen to this, guys, who have listened today, please get it out there and share it, because there is an inspirational story. And as highlighted in the show, a simple article from Celia that Avril saw has led to this moment. And why can't we do it again by sharing this episode and paying it forward another time for someone else as well? But for today, I just want to thank Avril once again, and I want to thank every single one of you for listening and tuning in, and I hope to speak more to you on the rocks.